a 100-year-old ripped from the headlines murder that remains unsolved until this very day. This is Chapter 4 of Author Talks with Lisa T. Come along with me and author Sara Divello as we try to solve the mystery. Maybe you fancy yourself an armchair sleuth. Or perhaps you're a true crime junkie. Maybe you just love a scandal with all those juicy details and big personalities. Well, author Sara Divello is all of the above, and she funnels her investigative energies into her new thriller, Broadway Butterfly. Hers is the real-life story of murdered flapper Dot King in 1920s New York. But before she reveals who she thinks done it, she shares how she first stumbled across the story.
Oh my gosh. So it is a crazy backstory, Lisa. And also I feel like a bit of a mystic, but I truly think that stories choose their tellers as much as tellers choose their stories. And I think that the reason that each writer writes about such different crimes and such different stories is because it is reflective of not just their own life experience, but the issues that they deeply care about. And as a do-gooder nerd who cares deeply about justice, the unsolved nature of this, as well as the way that justice was thwarted again and again, just stuck in my craw, and I had to tell the story as soon as I found it. And the way that I found it was one of these crazy, almost can't even believe it's true ways. So I was home in Philadelphia for Thanksgiving 10 years ago this year. And, the day after Thanksgiving, we're sitting around having our leftover turkey sandwiches, and conversation turns to reminiscing about family stories, yada, yada. And my Uncle Ed, who's a consummate storyteller, starts to say that back in the 60s, after high school let out, he and my Uncle David used to sneak over to the old Stotesbury estate where they would sneak cigarettes and drink beers. And I started thinking, man, the 60s sound fun. Like, where's my time machine? And then my second thought was, wait, what's the old Stotesbury estate? And he starts to tell me that back in the 80s, it was demolished. But before that, there was this incredible Gilded Age home that has since been completely demolished. And so he was telling me that it used to be known as the Versailles of America. And it was the third largest private home in the United States, bigger even than the White House, and ruins of it remain still there today. Well, needless to say, at the mention of ruins, I had to know more. So all 11 of us jump in cars. We caravan over to the next suburban development over from my aunt's suburban development, where every single house is a split level ranch, 6 stairs up, 6 stairs down, circa 1950. Everything looks the same. And we go over to the next suburban development where it's the same deal. And there, in between the Subarus and the tulip beds and the big wheels, are indeed the ruins of a great estate. So 50-foot tall pillars stretching up into the sky to nowhere, headless statues of Diana and Zeus, and a fountain that used to gurgle but now is totally dried up. And, a stairway in the middle of someone's yard that goes nowhere and comes from nowhere, but is a full set of stairs with a railing. I mean, it just was so bizarre to be standing there in suburban Philadelphia seeing this. It was cognitively dissonant, and I had to know, who were these people? What was this home? Who had lived here? And so I dove down the rabbit research hole, and I learned everything about this family. The builder of the owner of this estate, E.T. Stotesbury, was the richest man in Pennsylvania. He was a founding partner with J.P. Morgan, J.P. himself, his dear friend J.P. He was, he had this castle was 147 rooms. It had 28 bathrooms, 24 fireplaces. It was just this incredible, example of wealth and opulence, and had 3 floors above ground, 3 floors below. They had valets and maids and chefs and chauffeurs. And all of that is gone except for these ruins. And I was like, well, that is crazy and fascinating. Anyway, I'm not in the castle writing business, like back to work. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. So right around Valentine's Day, about 3 months later, I went back to the story because my spidey sense said there was a story here and I had to know what it was. And so I started, I kept researching and I found a 1953 book that was something like, I can't remember the exact title, but something like Scandalous Philadelphia, the 100 most shocking things to ever rock the Quaker City. And there in that book was one paragraph with one line that happened to say, the Stotesbury estate, which remains today, there's still a Stotesbury Regatta every October in Philadelphia. It's a rowing competition. The Stotesburys found themselves in a tough situation when, back 30 years ago in 1923, they were kind of connected to a murder. And I was like, ding, 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 there's my story.
What's really interesting is like the gateway, I guess, to this story isn't the main character herself, although Frances Stotesbury is one of the women that you focus on in this book. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. Can you give us like the Cliff Notes version of this murder before we dive into the book?
So March 15th, 1923, this is the height of the Roaring Twenties, the days of speakeasies and flappers and dancing the Charleston and, this incredible joie de vivre because the people who have survived the World War I and the first pandemic, which was the Spanish flu, are just so happy to be alive. Everybody's excited to still be here. The economy is booming. People have more money than they've ever had before. And because of technology like refrigeration and, cars, they're able to do things they were never able to do. So there's this incredible energy, this zest for life. And in the midst of this, and women have just gotten the vote, I should say some women, white women got the right to vote, which was withheld for many more decades from Black and indigenous women. But there's this incredible zest for life. And in the midst of all of this, on March 15th, this scandalous flapper, the Manhattan it girl of the day, known as the most beautiful woman in New York City, Dot King, is found murdered in her bed, wearing only a lacy negligee that barely reaches her knees. And so the scandalous nature of of both the short skirt and the short negligee and the scandalous woman that she ends up being revealed to be shocks the nation. And then the investigation as it unfolds every day basically becomes tabloid and media fodder because every shocking detail is crazier than the next. And because Dot King, in spite of the fact that she comes from really humble circumstances, she's the daughter of Irish immigrants. Her dad's a night watchman at Wanamaker's, which is a department store like Macy's or Kohl's. Her mom works at a laundry. She's not from any sort of means or money. In spite of this, she has worked her way up to be incredibly independent, very wealthy for, a young woman of the time. And she ends up is revealed that she is connected to some of the most powerful people in the country, from the Broadway gangster underworld all the way up to the White House. And so it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And that's the beauty of nonfiction, is that truth is stranger than fiction. Mark Twain was right.
I've read a lot of historical books in the years that I've been doing a podcast about books. But I've got to say, unlike all of those, I was struck by the fact that every single character in your book is based on a real life person. There is no fictional made up person in your story. Why did you make the decision to do that?
So I am part of, hashtag Team Twain. Again, I think that Mark Twain got it right. Truth is stranger than fiction. And I like to lean into that. So the burden on a fictional writer is to imagine a world and imagine a cast of characters that are completely made up and then make them feel real to people. And that is a heavy burden to bear because a lot of times people will say, someone would never do that. That's not realistic. That would never happen. And the beauty of writing the truth is that you can lean into the ludicrous. And I like that. I like to look at how crazy and complex humanity is, how each of us have done things that we are ashamed of and things that we are proud of and have been unimaginably generous, and also sometimes maybe not so, done things we're not so proud of. And I like to look at the tangled inner web of each of us. And I think it is fascinating how crazy people can be and how crazy the truth is. So I like to lean into that and to tell those true stories, because when someone says to me, that would never happen, I can say, oh, but it did.
Now, I think it's fair to say pointedly tell this story through several female characters. We have Dot King. She's kind of the main gal here. Then you've got Daily News reporter Julia Hartman. Let me see. I have all the names written down. You have the society woman Frances Stotesbury, the Stotesbury that you referred to earlier. And you've got Dot's black maid Ella Bradford. And while the story and these characters are all from the 1920s, you do have this like modern sensibility about them, very much aware of what women have to give up in order to either live the life they want to live, whether that's, being single, unmarried, without children, or being married and chasing a career, or even in Ella's case, just trying to live a life that's a little bit more free than the one she knew from what she grew up in the South. And it's really interesting how those two lives parallel each other.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're just at a really fabulous, fascinating time in our history here in 2023, where women's stories who have been relegated to the sidelines or who have been buried by time's dust are coming to the forefront in a multitude of really cool ways. And so, let's look at Julia Hartman. She's the lead character of this book. I tell it through 4 points of view, as you rightly pointed out, but it's really her story in my heart. And so Julia Hartman is a crime reporter at a time when women were not crime reporters. And she is a pioneering journalist, one of the 6 pioneering female journalists at the turn of the century. And this woman has been completely forgotten by time and history and covered by time's dust. Nobody knows the name Julia Hartman. And yet every single female journalist today stands on the shoulders of this woman, and their paths have been made easier by the fact that Julia Hartman blazed the trail. And that is a story I wanted to tell, and a story that deserves to be told. And this is a woman whose career should be taught in every journalism class and every history of journalism class. This is a woman who deserves to take her rightful mantle and her place in history, and has been denied the honor of being known for the work that she actually did for 100 years. And so I hope in some small way that this book helps to uncover, this woman's name and her incredible trailblazing career, and lets her be known to people, and lets her be known for the work that she did. And the same for the other characters. Ella Bradford is so incredibly brave. Ella Bradford is one of the 7 million Black Americans who are part of what's known as the Great Migration, which is that in the wake of the Civil War and the rampant legal racism of the segregated South and all of the racist policies that were in place at that time, she leaves. Ella Bradford sat in a quote unquote colored waiting room at the train station to get on a quote unquote colored car on the train, which of course, didn't have a cafe car and may not have even had a bathroom, for the 23-hour journey north. And the courage that took as a 20-year-old young person to leave everyone and everything that she knew behind, to go to a city she'd never been to, that is cold, that is fast, that is dark, that is dangerous, and make a better life for herself because it's not segregated. I mean, that's an incredible bit of courage. And she's one of the 7 million Black Americans that did that, and she deserves to have her story told. And, Dot King, again, the daughter of working class, first generation Irish American immigrants, came from nothing, worked her way up. Her family moved around a lot. They were always renting different apartments. There was some housing instability, probably financial instability, maybe some food insecurity. And yet 3 weeks before she was killed, Dot King deposited $10,000 of cash in one of her 3 bank accounts, and that level of success, which in today's dollars would be $170,000 in cash, that level of success and the power that comes with having your own money is such an incredible coup for, especially for anyone, but especially for someone who came from nothing.
But we won't talk about how she got that money.
We won't talk about how she got that money because it gets a little dodgy, a little sketchy. But women, everyone always does what they have to do to survive. And when she found herself kicked out of her home because she, cut her hair and dyed it blonde and was wearing short, skirts to the knee instead of skirts to the floor. And her brother thought she looked like a tramp and threw her out of the house. And she had to figure out a way to, to survive. And it isn't what we're all thinking it is. It is not the world's oldest profession. And so I think it's really interesting to tell stories of women's survival and of women's history, and especially when those stories maybe haven't gotten a chance to be told. But ultimately, I think this is a story about justice and what is fair and what is just. And in the words of the great poet Amanda Gorham, and how what just is not always justice. And I really wanted to take a look at that also through Detective John Coughlin, because he is in charge of meting out the justice, and yet he himself is a victim of injustice. And I really wanted to look at that as well.
And I also want to make sure that you mention, without any spoilers, how the Stotesbury family is connected. Is there a way to do that?
I think that, so Frances Stotesbury, the daughter of E.T. Stotesbury, the richest man in Pennsylvania, who, is at a time when women have very little leeway, very little power, really go from their father's home to their husband's home. They don't usually even have their own names. It just is, Mrs., John Smith. It's just, there's really very little visibility for women, very little power for women. Frances Stotesbury is named one of the foremost powerful women in society 3 weeks before the murder. And society is that upper echelon of incredible wealth that sort of encompasses celebrity culture. And we still see, this is a time because movies have just been invented. So we don't have, we have a few movie stars. We got Rudolph Valentino, Clara Bow, a few movie stars, but not really. Movies are still silent. We haven't invented the quote unquote talkies yet. So the celebrities at the time are the very wealthy. And we still see that today. Kim Kardashian, all the Kardashians, what have they done except be very wealthy and very beautiful, right? And so these people are the Kardashians of their time. They're very wealthy. They may or may not be, very beautiful, but they are very fabulous, and they're setting the style trends. And everyone wants to know, who are they dating? What are they wearing? Where are they vacationing? They want to know about their lives in the same way that people today want to know about the Kardashians' lives. And so she's named one of the foremost powerful women in this quote unquote celebrity culture called society, capital S society. And she's preparing to host a party for the presidential incumbent, Warren Harding, who's about to announce he's going to run for re-election. And hosting a party for the president of the United States when he's about to announce he's going to run again is a big freaking deal. And she is feeling the weight of hosting that party and not really paying attention to a murder of a scandalous, low-class flapper in New York City, until she finds herself pulled into it in a way she could have never anticipated.
Now, you've told me what drew you to the story. What do you think draws so many readers, watchers, listeners to the true crime genre?
I think the reason we love true crime, myself very much included, is because we all seek closure and we all seek justice. And that is just the delicious, catnip that draws us all in. And I think the reason, what's really interesting, is that true crime is, fans are primarily composed of women, and yet women are most often the victims of crimes. So, you might look at those two statistics and think, well, why would the people who end up being the victim most of the time be the biggest fan of hearing about themselves being victims? And I think that the reason that is because we want to prepare ourselves. I know that's why I, subconsciously, I think, watch and listen to all the podcasts and all the documentaries, because I think I got to be ready, and if I know that, if I think of every possible way that, someone could jump out of the bushes wielding a knife, but I know the zombie kill shots, I'm going to be ready should it ever happen to me. And I think it's that wanting to know about, that preparedness, that desire for preparedness.
So it's very obvious you did a lot of research into the story. And I don't want to, even though it's been 100 years, I don't want to give anything away for when people pick up to read your book. But we mentioned at the top that this remains unsolved. Do you think you know who did it?
Lisa, I think I know who done it, and I think I point the reader to it.
Okay. I've read the book,
Incontrovertibly.
so I know. So I mean, you're gonna have to read the book to find out. But
Yes. I think I know who done it. And Booklist said, I give readers everything they need to know in order to draw their own conclusions. And that was really my goal, because I think part of the fun of reading mysteries and thrillers is that you get to play detective. I mean, isn't that what we all secretly want? Isn't that why we all read Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys? Because we all want to be Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. We all want to grab the magnifying glass and, get to work. And so it's like Detective Divello reporting for duty. We all want to be that person, that detective, that amateur sleuth trying to figure it out. Jessica, from Murder, She Wrote, or Miss Marple or Poirot. We all want to be the detective. That's why we watch all the shows, CSI or whatever. We want to figure out who done it. There's just something really delicious about that. And, I think that I give everybody the clues that they need to draw their own conclusions. I think I make it pretty clear who I think who done it. And I do leave the door open a tiny bit because I think room for debate is fun. And, let's have some debates at book clubs. I think it was, suspect number A. I think it was suspect A. I think it was suspect B. Here's why. But what about the window, or whatever it is? What about the door? How could he have gotten back in? There's a lot of room for a really delicious detective debate. What about the coats? What about the coats, Lisa? What about the coats?
So that all being said, do you think in real life that this will ever be solved, or is this just going to go down in history as one of New York City's forever unsolved cases?
So I know where she's buried. Have I been tempted to grab a flashlight and a shovel and head to the Calvary Cemetery in the dark of night? Yes, I have, Lisa. And if if you want to join me one night, maybe we do a midnight outing. You could be broadcasting live graveside, because the thing about DNA is it doesn't disintegrate. We know that she fought her attacker, so we know that there is still DNA under her fingernails. This is solvable. We know who the descendants are. Let's get it solved. I mean,
So why hasn't anybody done that?
You know what? I think the reason that nobody has done that is because, Lisa, when I first started this, I literally thought that, with the technology that we have today, our solve rate would be 90%. What do you think our solve rate is today?
I'm going to guess it's somewhere around like 64.
Oh my God, you're good. Okay, you're way better than me. So I was like, my God, with the technology that we have, it must be
I work
90.
in news as my day job, so I think that's probably leans heavily into my guess.
You are so smart and so much better than me. So I was horribly wrong. So 30% of murders in the US go unsolved today.
Wow.
Now,
okay.
in predominantly Black urban neighborhoods like Houston, that number rises to 40%. So your guess of 64% is exactly between the 30% of the national average and the highest, number in the inner cities, which is 40%. So teach me your ways. Teach me your ways.
You just got to read a lot of police information sheets and do a lot of crime stories, and that's how you'll kind of arrive at that number.
Detective Divello is offering to be your humble unpaid intern. I will fetch you coffee and read the reports over your shoulder and distill them down to you in my very neatly handwritten notes. I was shocked, and because I thought with the technology that we have today, with street cams, with DNA, with touch DNA, I mean, how could this be possible? And yet it is. And so what I think is that when you look at a number today, and when you think about all the cases that are building up every day and every year, a 100-year-old cold case that got snowed under, political and financial pressure by those in power isn't going to be the top priority.
Except for authors and podcasters like you and me.
Except for Detective Divello.
Now, before I let you go, there's just one other note I took while reading your book that I think you're missing a marketing opportunity for. It's actually something that's attributable to Frances that she says. Hold on. I want a T-shirt with a line about Frances's line about spinsters. Something like spinsterhood, glorious solitude, and wholly in control of my destiny. I think you should be marketing that.
Yes, exactly. Because I think that's the other thing is that, there's still in 2023, there is this spoken and unspoken message that while it may not be the only pinnacle of a woman's life to get married and be a mother today, that is still subliminally and non-verbally communicated to us in myriad, multiple, unceasing ways. Like, for instance, I was just noticing the other day, what are the events in our lives that warrant parties, that warrant photo shoots, that warrant gifts and special outfits? And when I really thought about those things, it was, okay, a graduation party, right? Which is open to everyone, regardless of gender. But then we're looking at engagement parties, weddings, bridal showers, baby showers. And it's clear that what we're really celebrating in big ways is the path to marriage and motherhood. But what about the people who don't dream of marriage or motherhood? What about them? And what are we offering to celebrate there? And as someone who has opted out of motherhood, I decided to dress up in a white dress and hire a photographer and go do a photo shoot with my book, Baby. And it was so empowering and it was so great. And I went into, I just had my book launch in Philadelphia, and it was in a castle, and I went into the castle built by the same architect that built Frances's dad's White Marsh Estate. And I went into the castle in my white dress, and I held my book like a baby. No, I held it like a normal book. And I hired a photographer, and I said, this is a moment that I want to remember, and this is a moment that I want to celebrate. And I want to invite all of us to start thinking more broadly about what is important to us. What do we dream of? What do you dream of? What have you, accomplished, and what have you celebrated? And let's start having promotion parties, house buying parties, vacation parties. Let's start celebrating things that are beyond marriage and motherhood. And marriage and motherhood deserve to be celebrated, but so do a lot of other things.
What I love is that lesson comes shining through in a book that's about a 100-year-old murder, because you have that in Dot's character, you have that in Julia's character, and it's just amazing that like time is still there and can still teach us a few things, even if it's about an old murder case. Although, Sarah, for the record, I am not coming to a cemetery at midnight with you to dig up a body.
But you said you're the one who's inspiring.
You can be our exclusive first interview on the news side of things when you get arrested.
Well, I did. Yeah, I did think to myself, perhaps I should do a GoFundMe for my future bail. Like if I get arrested, and it doesn't have to be at midnight, Lisa. We could go at 6. It could be daylight.
It could be daylight.
It doesn't have to be midnight. I mean, I thought that would be more interesting to you for the podcast, but I'm happy to go during the daylight.
Well, we'll keep that option open then.
And you know what's really interesting to me, Lisa, is that in the many people that I've talked about this book with, no one has said that about this book except for you, about the marriage and motherhood thing. And
probably because I'm an unmarried, childless woman. That's probably why, because that stands out to me, because I don't read that all the time, and you're always being bombarded by society about what you should be. Even though everyone tells you you can live your life the way you want, there's always that underlying current. But we like wives and mothers,
Yes, because while they say you can live the life you want, they don't say here's a party and a dress and a photo shoot and a registry for living the life you want.
Right.
You can live the life you want, but the people who live the life that we want get the party and the dress and the registry and the special day and the cake and, and all of those, and the photo shoot and all of those things. So saying it but not celebrating it is its own message, right? And so I wanted to, I love that you picked up on this, and thank you for getting it, and thank you for resonating with it, and thank you for bringing it up, because the really amazing thing is that of the 4 characters who I tell this through, two are don't have children and never and didn't. And so, I really wanted to look at that. So, and actually Dot, who is the 5th character, and she's already dead when the book starts. That's not a spoiler alert. It's about her murder. She was also, unmarried and child-free. And I wanted to look at that because 100 years ago it was even harder than it is now to be single and to be child-free. And so as hard as it is now, and it is still hard, it was even 1,000 times harder then. And so Julia Hartman married her fellow reporter, Westbrook Pegler. They never had kids. They were this fabulous power couple. And I love that for her. She kept her maiden name, she kept her job, and she did her path. She did her career. And I think that's amazing. John D. Coughlin never married, never had kids. He stayed focused on his career. Obviously easier for a man to do, but there still must have been incredible cultural pressure on a first-generation Irish-American cop to be married and have 12 kids, and the two, and then, Francis and Ella do have kids. Dot didn't have kids. And I wanted to really look at that because I think the other thing too is we simultaneously glorify motherhood, yet we don't support it. And I think from what I hear from all of my friends who have chosen to be mothers, which is almost all of my friends, it's not always cracks up to be. It isn't always what it cracks up to be. And so let's start talking about that. Let's start talking about that instead of talking about this glorified version of what we want it to be or what we think it's going to be. Let's talk about what it really is. And let's start to celebrate all the many paths that are open to us.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, that's really what we should be striving for is uplifting everyone, no matter what their choice is.
Yes, exactly. Why are promotion parties not a thing? Why is that not a built-in thing? Why is there not a photo shoot?
You should have invited press to your photo shoot.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that.
The next book. There is going to be a next book, right?
There is going to be a next book, and
have you found that story yet that sparked it? Are you still looking?
I am still looking. So right now I'm just focusing on supporting this butterfly's launch as she flutters out of the chrysalis and takes flight, and then I'm going to open my aperture to the next story. And I think if you approach with you set your intention for what kind of story you want to tell, and you have an open mind and you have an open heart, your story will come to you, and you will come to your story. And and that I'm going to let that unfold in its own organic time.
Well, and I think that's a wonderfully organic place to end this interview. We've been talking with Sara Divello. The book is Broadway Butterfly, a thriller. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed reading the book and talking to you about the book, which is, I guess, why I do this podcast.
Yay. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to talk with you, truly. And thank you so much for getting this message of the book.
And that's where we close the book on this chapter. Next time, you know what? I don't know what's coming up next. Maybe it's a horror story about a haunted house with the ending of all endings. Or perhaps a mystery featuring a mother-daughter crime-solving duo. Or maybe a vampire story set in colonial Mexico. Like I'm fond of saying, so many books, so little time. But if you do find yourself with a little time, be sure to check in with me at lisatbooks.com and on Twitter/X and Instagram at lisatbooks. Keep turning those pages.